Let's talk about a Roman emperor who stepped onto the world stage, looked at a dying pagan empire, and completely changed the game. In just a few short years, he set in motion a series of events that would define the next 1,000 years of Western history. We're talking about Constantine the Great, a man whose decisions, and I mean this literally, created the world we live in today. But how on earth did that happen? How did the Roman Empire, which, by the way, spent centuries brutally persecuting Christians, suddenly become the religion's greatest champion? That's the big mystery we're diving into. And the answer really lies in the ambition, the faith, and, yeah, the ruthlessness of this one man. So, to really get Constantine, you first have to understand the world that made him. The late 3rd century Roman Empire was, to put it mildly, a complete mess. It was way too big to govern, it was constantly under attack, and it was just wrecked by civil war after civil war as ambitious generals fought for the throne. Emperor Diocletian knew something had to change, and he came up with a pretty radical solution. He called it the Tetrarchy, which just means rule of 4. The idea was pretty clever on paper. You split the empire between 2 senior emperors, the Augusti, and 2 junior emperors, the Caesars. This was supposed to bring stability, help manage the huge territory, and this was the most important part, create a clear line of succession so they could finally stop all the civil wars. Seemed like a neat idea, right? Well, the reality was just chaos. Instead of stability, the Tetrarchy led to almost constant civil war as all the co-rulers schemed against each other. Instead of an orderly succession, the system totally ignored ambitious sons, guys like Constantine, which, you can imagine, only fueled their hunger for power. And instead of unity, it kicked off the Great Persecution, the single most brutal and widespread attack on Christians in all of Roman history. This was the broken, violent system that Constantine was absolutely determined to conquer. So, this chaotic system is the perfect backdrop for the most legendary moment in Constantine's entire life. In 312 AD, he just decides, you know what, I'm done with these rules. He makes this incredibly audacious gamble. He pulls his army together from Gaul and Britain and marches straight for Rome to take power from his rival, Maxentius. And I mean, on paper, this was a suicide mission. Constantine was massively outnumbered. Maxentius was dug in at Rome, safe behind these formidable walls, and he had the elite Praetorian Guard. Every single military advisor, even Constantine's own fortune tellers, told him it was impossible. But Constantine believed he had something else on his side. Or, at least he claimed he did. On the eve of what was going to be the most important battle of his life, Constantine said he received a vision. And this phrase, "In this sign you will conquer," would become one of the most famous declarations in history. It was a promise of victory, but it was tied to a very specific, and at the time, a very controversial, symbol. Now, the ancient sources give us slightly different versions of the story. The historian Eusebius says Constantine and his entire army saw a cross of light hanging in the sky. Another writer, Lactantius, says the command came to him in a dream. But they both agree on the most important part. Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint a brand new symbol on their shields, the Chi-Rho, a monogram made from the first 2 Greek letters of Christ's name. For a Roman army, this was absolutely revolutionary. And against all odds, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, he won. Maxentius's much larger army was completely routed. Maxentius himself actually drowned in the Tiber River trying to escape. Just like that, Constantine marched into Rome as the undisputed master of the West. Whether you call it divine intervention or a stroke of psychological genius, the victory was absolute. But, conquering Rome, that was just the beginning. The empire was still divided. There was another rival, Licinius, ruling in the east. And Constantine's ambition wasn't just to be an emperor. His goal was to be the sole emperor. It was this relentless 18-year climb to the top. It all started way back in 306, when his troops declared him emperor in York, England. Then came the huge victory at the Milvian Bridge in 312, which gave him the entire West. And finally, in 324, after another massive civil war, he defeated Licinius and reunited the whole Roman Empire under his command. For the first time in decades, one man ruled it all. The Tetrarchy was officially dead. So he's got absolute power. Now what? What does he do with it? Well, Constantine makes 2 world-changing decisions that are going to define his legacy and basically shape the next 1,000 years of history. He embraces a new faith, and he builds a new capital. First off, he completely flips Rome's policy on Christianity. Step 1 is the Edict of Milan, which officially ends all persecution. But he doesn't just stop at tolerance. Oh no. For step 2, he personally calls together the Council of Nicaea to unify the church and decide what was official doctrine, which gives us the Nicene Creed that's still recited today. And for step 3, he starts pouring the wealth of the empire into the church, building these magnificent basilicas, giving clergy special legal status. He basically makes Christianity the cool new thing in the empire.
His second huge move was to literally move the capital of the empire. He knew old Rome was in decline, and all the real action, the money, the military threats, it was all in the east. So he picks the ancient city of Byzantium, which was perfectly positioned for both defense and trade. He then rebuilds it into a new Rome, a Christian capital for his new Christian empire. And, of course, he names it after himself, Constantinople. This single decision made sure the Roman Empire would survive in the East as the Byzantine Empire for another 1,000 years. Okay, so far, we've got the story of a brilliant general, a visionary Christian ruler. But history is never that simple, is it? The historical record is way more complicated. Constantine's reign was also marked by these acts of shocking brutality that have left historians scratching their heads for centuries. Just 2 years after unifying the empire, Constantine did the unthinkable. He had his own eldest son and celebrated heir, a guy named Crispus, executed. Then, shortly after that, his own wife, Fausta, was killed. The reasons why are totally lost to history. Some ancient sources hint at some kind of terrible palace scandal, maybe an affair. Others suggest it was just a cold, political calculation to clear the way for Fausta's sons to inherit the throne. Whatever the truth is, it's a really dark stain on his legacy. And so, this debate over who he really was has been raging for centuries. His Christian supporters, like Eusebius, painted him as a saint. His pagan nephew, Julian, called him a greedy tyrant. Through the Middle Ages, he was seen as the perfect Christian king. But then, during the Renaissance, more critical sources were rediscovered, and the picture got a lot murkier. Which brings us right back to the same fundamental question that historians are still asking. Was his conversion real, or was it just brilliant politics? So that's what it all comes down to. Was Constantine the Great a pious visionary, guided by God to build a Christian empire? Or was he a brilliant but absolutely ruthless tyrant who saw which way history was heading and just used a new religion to lock down his power and build a dynasty? You know, maybe the real answer is that he was both, and it's in that contradiction that we find one of the most fascinating and consequential figures in all of history.